Welcome to another Checiegirl Creations video. So today I will be doing a painting using palette knives and paintbrushes on this canvas board. It's around 5x7 and I got it from the works in like a pack of 6. It's a great price for like that amount, and the only thing I would say about it is if you want a really smooth canvas to start off with, you can give it a second coat of primer. So I would use chalk primer or gesso. It's easier to find gesso. I make the chalk primer myself. Yeah, but I didn't mind too much since I knew I was going to go in with quite a few layers of paint. And I'll be using, the paints I'll be using aren't branded. I think a couple of them are, but most of them are just unbranded, quite cheap acrylic paints. They were a bit too transparent. Like, they didn't really do what acrylic paints are supposed to, which is like layer up and be nice and opaque. They were quite transparent, which was tricky when I was trying to build layers or cover things up that I didn't like. So they don't have a brand, and I'm not really sure where they came from because I don't have the packaging anymore, I don't think. I got them a while back for like a birthday. So I wouldn't really recommend those. The ones that I first started off with, the first acrylics I started off with was by Boldmere, and I do use one of those. I use the deep red Boldmere. And those are quite nice. And I also have some like Royal and Langnickel paints, which you can see kind of more to the top right of the screen. I didn't use those for these because I want to use up like a lot of my cheap acrylics for things, because I have a lot of acrylics. This is just a handful, it's really bad. So I thought I would use the cheaper ones for this, since it was just kind of just playing around and nothing really special. But if I was doing something a bit more that I was going to put a bit more time into, I would use my better quality paints. So yeah, these were quite thin, not very pigmented, and yeah, very transparent. So what I would use these paints for was things for more like jelly printing or art journaling, where I don't really want to cover up, it's more like a glaze. So yeah. So anyways, I've started off with the sky. I use cobalt blue and white for the sky. I don't know if that's a proper cobalt blue. I'm just saying the colors that are on the tubes. And all the colors and materials that I use will be listed down below in the description as usual. So yeah, so I just put that down. When I do palette knife paintings, I like to have a lot of texture. So I decided I wanted the sky to be this kind of like strokey kind of texture. And then like the hills and like the tree would be a different texture. And I think like earlier on, I did kind of sketch in like where I wanted things. And it doesn't look exactly like where I marked in the spaces. That was just kind of like brainstorming thing. And yeah, so I wanted some hills and I wanted the tree in the foreground. And for the hills, I used lemon yellow, emerald green, and sap green for the hills. The emerald green is a weird green. I don't think that's actually emerald green, because that's not the kind of green I think of when I look at think of emeralds. But again, those are just the paint names on the tubes. And yeah, so I just kind of put that layer down, and I realized it wasn't really covering, so I do go in and add some more paints. Oh, and if you would like to see this process in real time with real-time commentary, you can become a Patreon from just $3 a month, and you can get early access to my Friday YouTube videos, and they'll be real time. So I will have all that linked down below, and as well like in the iCard and stuff. And you'll see every time I do a new section, I add the paint to the edges. I like to paint my edges of like canvases or canvas boards so that they don't have to be framed. I quite like the look of, I think you refer to it as a naked canvas. I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that, but I do like the look of it. So I paint the edges of my canvas, especially if I am selling it, so that if the person doesn't want to frame it or just doesn't feel like it, because I don't think framing is cheap, the edges are already finished. So you can see I'm adding like some more paint to the hills. I did have to add a lot more paint than I thought I would to get like what I was kind of going for. And the hills in the background will be darker. So I'm using more like the sap green on the hills in the back. And then the hills in the front will be a bit lighter. And I added like more yellow to the closest hill, just to kind of put some depth in. And I do kind of add some darker green and lighter green like to the background and the foreground hills. Just so it looks a bit, So you can see it's kind of like the same things growing on those hills, they're just going further back. So that's what I was kind of looking for. And I do like to put colors that I'm using in different sections, like kind of dotted around, so that the piece looks a bit more like cohesive. So I kind of added that, and I do go in, like I do take some of the paint off with my finger, off like the palette knife, and I do go in and add some as well on the hills. I actually found that my finger was actually easier to use than the palette knife. Yeah, because as you can see, I'm using my left hand, and for those of you who don't know, that's my non-dominant hand. My right hand is still a bit iffy, so I'm just using my left hand for now, as I said I would. And yeah, using a palette knife with my left hand was very difficult. It's easier for me to use a paintbrush from the looks of it. It'll probably just need practice, to be honest. But yeah, so I also go in with my fingers a little bit to smooth some areas down. I also kind of like the texture that my finger was putting down. And when you're trying to build up layers, especially if you're using cheaper paints, because when you're palette knife painting, it is nicer to use heavy body paints, but those aren't cheap. So I'm used to just using like regular acrylics, most of them cheap acrylics. So especially when you're using a thinner paint, you do want to be quite light-handed. So if you're like adding another layer of paint over wet paint, you want to go quite light-handed so that you don't pick up the other layer of paint. So yeah, so that's one like tip to go with, like if you're not using very heavy bodied paints. This technique is also great for oils as well, but oils take forever to dry, so that's why I tend to use acrylics more. I have used oils before, and they are really nice to use, and they're lovely and creamy. Even like the cheap stuff that I was using was really nice and creamy, but it just takes forever to dry. And I don't have that drying space, so I just stick to acrylics. And you can see I'm adding some flowers in. I didn't like how they looked at all, but as you'll see, we do add a lot of layers to this piece. I'm just kind of dabbing them in, but I just didn't have the control that I would with my right hand to get the shapes that I was going for. So I decided to just put those down, and I knew I wanted to have like yellow, blue and red flowers, and I added blue to kind of bring the blue from the sky down a little bit, so it wasn't just in one section. I didn't want the sky to look like sectioned off from the rest of the painting, which is why I brought the blue down. And I mixed the blue, yellow and red with a little bit of white, so it would be a little bit more, just a bit lighter and not as bright and stark. But yeah, so I didn't really like how these turned out. They just looked like blobs, and that wasn't really the look I was going for. I was looking for more detailed blobs. So I'll fix that up later on. So now for the tree. The tree was the most challenging. I'm still not completely happy with how it looked like, but at one point I just had to put it down and just call it a day. So I just wasn't sure how I could like salvage it. So I think I used all the greens, as well as this another darker green from something else, another unbranded paint. Yeah, I'm not too sure like who that's by, but like a really darker green, more like a kind of foresty green, as well to the tree. And I also added another green just to kind of separate it from the hills a little bit, and I did want that tree to look quite dark. I also add some blue as well as white and yellow. I think instead of using the lemon yellow on the tree, I think I used like a kind of medium yellow, again by unbranded paint. I think that's what I did. And yeah, so I was just trying to put down like a really nice texture, but it just wasn't working out, to be honest. It wasn't, no. And I feel as if maybe if I had stepped away and given it a break, like I might have been able to stop it before it went too far, but I didn't, because I did want to do it all while it was like wet. So that's one of the positives of oils. Like I could have stepped away and come back, it still would have been wet, and then I would have been able to look at it with fresh eyes. So that's one of the nice things about oils, but it's fine. This was just to like for a bit of fun. I just wanted to kind of get messy. I thought it'd be nice to use my palette knife because I haven't used that in ages. So I'm not too fussed that it didn't turn out exactly how I pictured. And I can always go over this canvas board and do something else. Like I have done a few videos where I've taken canvases where I wasn't liking how it was going, so I just put it aside and I've just done something completely different over top. So I will link those in an iCard. I think I have 2 of those kind of videos just to show like how you can salvage a canvas that it didn't go right, but you don't want to waste a canvas or a canvas board, and you can always go over, especially if you do mixed media. You could just add loads of layers and just make it a new canvas. So I left it to dry after this, I believe. Let me see. Do I leave it to dry? Yes, I did. And oh, another thing I realized with those paints I was using, that they dry matte, but not a nice kind of matte, like a really dull matte kind of color. They lose their vibrancy from when it was wet, which is a shame. I was kind of able to fix that up later on, but yeah, it is a very matte look. So I did notice that as well. I can't remember the last time I've used those paints. A lot of them was actually still like closed. I just thought I would mention that they do quite dry, quite matte. So I thought I would bring up my paintbrush to try to salvage this piece. And I was adding some more white and blue. I also added some yellow to the sky just because, like, I was thinking kind of sun rays. I was just kind of throwing stuff at this piece at this point. And yeah, so I added some more white to like suggest more clouds and some more blue. And I went in quite light-handed, but because these are very thin and translucent paints, they didn't really cover up the palette knife like texture I had with the sky, which was nice. So that's why I thought I could use that more for like jelly printing or art journaling when I just want to add a glaze but I don't want to cover up. And you can especially see on the hills, like I'm putting quite a bit of paint on these hills, but you can still easily see the flowers, and that doesn't normally happen with like good acrylics. And you don't have to go up at like a high price. Like the paints I use are like Reeves, like Boldmere from the works, Royal and Langnickel, and those paints aren't high-end at all, but they do work a lot more like acrylics. So as long as the acrylics, like, you know, is opaque and is a vibrant color, that's a pretty good acrylic. You don't have to go like really high-end like straight away, especially if you're first starting off. So it took a lot of layers to cover up the flowers on the hill. And even like when I was like trying to change the shape slightly of the hills, it took a while to kind of cover up the sky, which was interesting because I was going in with a dark color over a lighter color. So that was an interesting experience. I've never used acrylics that are so transparent before. Yeah, that was interesting. So again, I'm using the same colors as before. I didn't add any new colors, I don't think. No. Oh, I did forget to say that I did use a kind of burnt umber brown kind of color in the tree as well. I don't do that with the second layer with the paintbrushes because I didn't actually like what that did. So yeah, I'm just fixing up the hills, just adding a little bit more detail. You see, I have a lot more control with the paintbrush and the palette knife. I find it's not actually that difficult painting with my left hand. It's more things like when I have to put my signature in, or just like paint in detail, like when I need to have a steady hand, my left hand like shakes like a Polaroid picture. So yeah, that's when I find it challenging. But when I'm doing like an abstract kind of background with my paintbrush, it's not actually that bad. So I've actually been enjoying doing lots of like backgrounds to get some background work in and kind of practice doing my landscapes and stuff like that while I'm waiting for my right hand to get better. Once I added like all the colors and stuff and I was happy with how the hills were looking, I thought it was time to add the flowers. So again, deep red with white, I added that in a few places. Again, you can see I'm just putting on blobs. I was going for more of an impressionistic style with this one, and I just wanted to be quite abstract and just more like strokes that suggesting that there's flowers on the hills. And I didn't mean to go and completely mostly cover up the hills, but that's what happened, and I actually really like how that looked. It took a while. It went through a bit of a hot mess stage, like an ugly kind of stage, and I wasn't too sure like how it would look, and I kept on looking at the viewfinder to see what it looked like from like a distance. And yeah, I actually ended up really liking like that part of the painting, and the sky. I really liked. The tree was a bit but I did like the sky and the hills and like the meadowy kind of look. And I'm sorry I don't have this whole footage in of me painting the flowers. My head got in the way a lot, as you can see. I didn't cut out all of the bits. I just tried to like keep as much of the footage as possible. So I apologize for getting my head in the way when I was doing the flowers. But yeah, it's just basically just the kind of just slapping down the paint. I would say kind of just pressing the paintbrush against the canvas and just kind of smoothing it on like slightly, but being kind of light-handed and just kind of dabbing, especially in the background hills, just kind of dabbing on that color. So I made that kind of orangey peachy color with the deep red, I think the medium yellow, and the white. So all the colors I mixed with white, and yeah, I really like how I mixed it with white. I didn't want it to be really as that vibrant and rich. I wanted it to kind of look a lot softer. So that's why I added white with all the colors I was using. And when I was like making new colors, I would just kind of say add more yellow to certain things, or add more red, or add more blue. So I was still using the same colors over and over again, but just like more of one color. So like this one I'm doing now, I added some more yellow to that orangey mix, and it just made a more of a kind of a warmer orange, and yeah, and there wasn't as much white that time. So I was just kind of just mixing and playing around with colors and just layering things up. And yeah, so I had a lot of fun adding the flowers, I've got to say. So what have you guys been up to recently? I hope you guys are finding some way to keep yourselves entertained at this time at the moment. I know we're starting to open up slightly, but it's not going to open up for a while and get back to normal for ages. So what have you guys been doing? I haven't been feeling the most creative lately. I've been feeling actually really lazy, to be honest. Like procrastination is really high right now. All I've been doing is reading, which I've been really enjoying. But yeah, I haven't been creating much. There's no art block or anything. I'm just feeling too lazy to do so. So I'm mostly reading. I'm making sure to make my videos for you guys for YouTube and Patreon, and then I just do some more reading. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing. I'm working on the tree right now. You can see I'm just trying to add like some more textures and layers, and I just keep on adding and adding and adding. And at one point I just decided life was too short and I was going to just move on. And then after that I did add some like highlights to the flowers, again using some white. And you'll see very much the same way I did the flower, just kind of slapping down the color. And afterwards I mixed like a brown using pretty much all the colors I had used. It was a very dark brown though, more closer to black. Like when you want to make your own kind of black or like brown, you can just basically mix the colors you've used on the piece and you'll get yourself a brown. And you might have to add, say, more blue if you want a bit more colder brown or a darker brown. So just kind of play around until you get the colors right. But you can just mix that instead of bringing in a black, because sometimes when you bring in a black, when you haven't used it in other places on the piece, it'll look too stark. That's pretty much how I finish things off, adding like some highlights and stuff. And I really liked, once I added like the white and the flowers, I really liked how they looked. Oh, so I thought I would mention the books I've been reading. I can't remember where we left off last, but I'm pretty sure I mentioned that I finished the Dragonslayer series by Jasper Fforde with 2 Fs. I'm waiting for him to write the 4th one. And then now I'm reading the Nursery crime series, also by Jasper Fforde. I've finished the Big Over Easy, and now I'm on to the 4th bear, which I'll probably finish the day after I do this voiceover. Probably by the time this video is out, I'll be onto a new book for sure. I really love his writing. Yeah, I've kind of fallen down the rabbit hole of Jasper Fforde's books. Yeah, so I've been reading that, and I also read, let me see if I can remember, I'll put these up on screen just in case I'm getting the titles wrong. I also read, I think it's called The Girl of Ink and Stars, and that was a really sweet like adventure book. It was really nice. It was strange to read that in between the Big Over Easy and the 4th bear while I was waiting for the 4th bear to be delivered, because the Nursery crime series is quite surreal and bizarre. It's hilarious. I love it. Also, it doesn't make sense, but somehow it works. And from coming from like reading such a bizarre book like that to then reading a pretty like, you know, an adventure book that doesn't have anything weird, bizarre and surreal in it was quite strange. It was like coming back down to earth. So yeah, that was a really sweet book. I will put the title up as well as the author because I can't remember her full name. And it's a short book, but it's really nice. I think it was a bestseller last year because like everyone was getting that for Christmas. So that is it. You can see how I finished off. I'm pretty much happy with it. It's just the tree, which was a shame. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are all staying safe and as sane as possible. If you enjoyed the video, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to click that bell so you get notified whenever I upload a new video. I upload every Friday. And yeah, so if you're not a new subscriber, thanks for sticking around, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks again for watching. Bye.